Hello everyone, in this video I am here to brief on the periods of English literature. Historians, for the convenience of discussion, have divided entire segment of literature into different segments of time, which is known as periods of English literature. First, let's move on to the Old English period, which extends from 450 AD to 1066 AD. Old English language was a mixture of native Brythonic language and tribal Germanic language. Anglo-Saxons used alliteration and kennings in their poetry. Anglo-Saxon poetry can be divided into three: lyric poetry, which included poems like The Seafarer and The Wanderer. Heroic poetry includes a classic example, Beowulf, and we have Christian poetry, which includes The Dream of the Rood. Famous poets of this era are Cynewulf and Caedmon. Anglo-Saxon prose developed after the arrival of Christianity. Alfred the Great is a popular figure in this Anglo-Saxon prose. His Anglo-Saxon Chronicle was a famous work during this era, which covered from 9th century to the 11th century. Next, we are moving on to the Middle English period, which extends from 1066 to 1500 AD. Middle English period is also known as Anglo-Norman or the Anglo-French period. It started with the Norman conquest in 1066 AD under the Norman ruler William the Conqueror. The upper class started speaking in French and the lower class and middle class started speaking in ordinary English language. Universities were established in this century: Oxford University in the 12th century and Cambridge University in the 13th century. The popular poets of Anglo-Norman period are Geoffrey Monmouth, Pearl Poet and layman. The popular works during this age are Sir Gawain and Green Knight, The Owl and the Nightingale. Within the Middle English period, we have the age of Chaucer, which extends from 1340 to 1400 AD. Geoffrey Chaucer is the father of English poetry, and he lived under the reign of three important kings: Edward III, Richard II, Henry IV. Notable events during his period are the Peasant Rebellion, 100 Years of War between England and France, and the Black Death. His most important works of Geoffrey Chaucer are, of course, the Canterbury Tales, House of Fame, Parliament of Fowls, the Book of Duchess, etc. Other poets of his age are William Langland and Sir John Gower. Important prose work of this age is, of course, John Wycliffe's translation of Bible. He translated the Latin Bible into ordinary English language. Subdivision of this Middle English period is Age of Revival, which started from 1400 and extended till 1558. This age is known for the invention of printing press, where William Caxton invented the printing press. It was during this age Martin Luther King appeared and he took efforts in reviving the Catholic Church. War of Roses, which was a war fought between the royalties, House of York and House of Lancaster, also took place during this age. The War of Roses ended and the Tudor dynasty came into throne in England. Next, we are moving on to the Renaissance age, which extends from 1500 to 1600. 16th century was a momentous century not only for England but for the whole world. Renaissance, a rebirth, affected every aspect of human life. The Renaissance was a many-sided movement which influenced learning, education, art, architecture, science, geography, and above all, religion. This Renaissance can be again subdivided into Elizabethan age, Jacobean age, Caroline age, and Commonwealth. First, moving on to the Elizabethan age. The time period is from 1558 to 1603 under the reign of Queen Elizabeth. Henry VII was the first Tudor ruler. He married 6 times for a son. His first wife, Catherine Argan, gave birth to Mary, and his second wife, Anne Boyle, gave birth to Elizabeth. Queen Elizabeth ascended to throne after the violent reign of Queen Mary. Elizabethan era is described as the golden age of English literature. Drama flourished in this particular period. Major poets of this era were Edmund Spenser and Philip Sidney. Major dramatists include Shakespeare, Christopher Marlowe, and Thomas Kyd. Next, moving on to Jacobean age. The timeline of the Jacobean age is the reign of James I, which extends from 1603 to 1625. King James ascended the throne after Queen Elizabeth. Queen Elizabeth was the last Tudor ruler, and James I belongs to Scotland. He was the first Stuart king. His age is remarkable for the Gunpowder Plot, which was a conspiracy by a small group of Catholics to murder James I and restore Catholicism in England. Guy Fawkes was a prominent person, and later he was arrested by Kingsmen. Moving on to Caroline age. Caroline age started in the year 1625 and entered in 1649. This period was under King Charles. Charles I was the son of James I. However, he took several wrong decisions which made people throw him out of his throne, which ended in civil war. Next, we are moving on to Caroline age, which started from 1625 and ended in 1649. Caroline age refers to the reign of King Charles. Charles I was the son of King James I, and he took several wrong decisions which which made people to throw him out of his throne. And this led to civil war. Major dramatists of this age are Ben Jonson, Beaumont and Fletcher, Chapman, Job Webster, and Thomas Middleton. This was the era where we witnessed the metaphysical poets Andrew Marvell and John Donne. 1649 to 1660 is regarded as a Commonwealth period. King Charles I and the Parliament of England waged war against them, and we are moving on to Civil War and the Commonwealth, which extends from 1640 to 1660. Civil War took place between Charles I and the Parliament of England. Oliver Cromwell, the Puritan, was the leader of the Parliament. In 1649, Oliver Cromwell executed Charles I, after which he became the Lord Protector of England. Theatres were banned during the Puritan age. Famous authors of this age are John Milton, who wrote Paradise Lost, and John Bunyan, who wrote Pilgrim's Progress. Now we are moving on to the Neoclassical age, which extends from 1660 to 1785. 1660 to 1700 is marked as the Restoration age, where Charles II was restored to power after Oliver Cromwell. Charles II is the son of Charles I. The ban of theatres were lifted. Restoration age is again subdivided into the age of Dryden, age of Pope, and age of Johnson. Age of Dryden is remarkable for the satires. There were coffee shops where the authors gathered and writers gathered and discussed on various issues. From 1700 to 1745, it was termed as the Augustan age, and it is also known as the Neoclassical age, where there was a revived interest in the classical writers. The writers of this particular era imitated the classical writers Ovid, Virgil, Horace. It was also the age of enlightenment, where it is also known as the age of reason. Scientific revolution took place during this era, and we had the famous people Isaac Newton and Galileo coming up in this particular age. Dr. Johnson published English dictionary during the age of Johnson. Prominent authors of this age are Jonathan Swift, Addison, Richard Steele, Samuel Richardson, Daniel Defoe, and Henry Fielding. Now we are moving on to the Romantic period, which started in the year 1798 with the publication of lyrical ballads. The social event which led to the Romantic revival in English literature is the French Revolution. French Revolution was in the year 1789, and after the French Revolution, common man became the center. Writers began to write about the life of common people. Imagination and prominence to nature were given during the Romantic age. Romantic poets wrote about nature, and there was a revived interest in the rustic. People wrote about villages, the life of ordinary people. Prominent Romantic poets of this age are Samuel Taylor Coleridge, William Wordsworth, Robert Southey, John Keats, P.B. Shelley, and Lord Byron. Next, we are moving on to the Victorian age. Victorian age was from 1839 to 1901, where Queen Victoria reigned England. It was during this era Industrial Revolution happened. There were a deterioration in the working condition of the people and a working class emerged in England. Novels of Elizabeth Gaskell and Charles Dickens talk about the social conditions of the working people. It was during this time Charles Darwin published The Origin of Species, which completely changed the outlook of people towards religion. There arose a conflict between reason and religion. Popular novelists of this age are Charles Dickens, George Eliot, Bronte sisters, Oscar Wilde, Thomas Hardy, and William Thackeray. Now we are moving on to the modern age, which started from 1901 till 1945. One of the prominent incidents that took place during these years was the First World War. The First World War shook the entire humanity. The horrors that they witnessed during this era made the writers to adopt a new style in their writings. It was also followed by Great Depression, and the stock market crashed and it affected the global economy. Bonnet's writer T.S. Eliot saw a decline in civilization and a degradation in humanity. Modern writers also became interested in the functioning of human mind with the publication of Sigmund Freud's The Interpretation of Dreams. Modernist writers experimented in the writing style where they adopted nonlinear narratives, stream of consciousness, symbolism, imagism, etc. Popular novelists of this era are T.S. Eliot, James Joyce, Virginia Woolf, Joseph Conrad, George Orwell, E.M. Forster, D.H. Lawrence, etc. Next, we are moving on to the postmodern age started in the year 1945 after the Second World War. Britain lost its power and US became the superpower with great economy. Everything was fragmented and distorted. Writers began to celebrate the absurdity and disorientation instead of logic and rationality. Important literary movements were the theatre of the absurd, the angry young man movement, and the confessional poetry. Popular writers of this age are Samuel Beckett, Harold Pinter, John Osborne, Philip Larkin, Ted Hughes, Angela Carter, Doris Lessing, etc. So that is all about the periods of English literature in brief. Thank you.